First Lady. They are now there getting ready to prepare to lay a wreath at this memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We're watching what's happening in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Obviously, what's happening at the World Trade Center remains in New York, the new memorial there, also here at the Pentagon. Let's watch and listen for a moment as the President and the First Lady prepare to lay this wreath.
Cameras down.
So the President and the First Lady, they're in Shanksville earlier in the day. They were in New York. They'll be heading here to the Pentagon later to lay a wreath as well, and then there'll be a formal memorial service at the Kennedy Center here in Washington later tonight. We're continuing our coverage on this, the 10th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attack.
President Obama, who was here earlier, is at the memorial in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the crash site of Flight 93. Later, he will visit the Pentagon. Joining us now here is Andy Card, the former White House Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush. I guess you'll always be remembered for that whisper.
It's an iconic picture, but I am not an iconic person.
Well, you know, so much has been made of that picture in terms of the president's reaction, and did he look like he didn't know what he was going to do? And I know you've been over all of that, and I thought maybe I'd ask you something this way. Is there anything that this president did that day that surprised you?
Well, I was a little bit surprised that he reacted so calmly when I said words that were so outrageous. But I actually was pleased with how he reacted.
And tell us the words again.
This day, I don't want people to remember me whispering in the president's ear. I want them never to forget the innocent victims and the first responders that answered the call to duty, and then they themselves became victims, and those heroes on that flight that prevented a lot of other Americans from dying, probably at the U.S. Capitol.
We talk a lot about how September 11th changed America and changed the world. Personally, did it change Andy Card?
Oh, yes. I mean, it did change me. It changed. I was much more serious about the obligations I had to be President's Chief of Staff. I never viewed the job the same way I did after September 11th as I did before it. Before, I was focused on the President's agenda. After September 11th, I was focused on what does the president need to do for America. It did change me, and obviously it changed all of our lives in the context of new bureaucracies. But think of the change immediately after the attack. America united. The world actually united with America. We were chanting USA, USA, USA. We were also paranoid. We saw enemies in our neighbors. So we had conflicting feelings of unity and suspicion. And that was a hard thing to overcome, both the unity and the suspicion. And so relatively quickly, we got back into the partisan divides and the philosophical debates that make democracy so exciting. And I missed the unity. We're still a little bit more paranoid than I think we need to be.
Certainly in New York, it was this remarkable time after the day after September 11th, and even on that day of unity. I remember going by a firehouse and just people gathering there just to kind of, they wanted to do something, just show solidarity, you know, with firefighters.
I was struck when the president visited this site on September 14th, 2001, and the crowd was chanting USA, USA. I looked over and I saw some rescue workers chanting USA, USA, and they had Japanese flags on their uniform. And then there were a team of search and rescue dogs, and the handlers were chanting USA, USA, and they had Canadian flags on the uniform.
It's interesting you said a moment ago, though, you feel like we're maybe still more paranoid than we need to be. I don't want to put it that was the word, but...
Well, I think we still look very skeptically at our neighbors inside the United States because we were told to be vigilant, and we are vigilant. And remember, a lot of the attacks that have been thwarted were thwarted by the vigilance of American citizens. Someone on a plane saying, "What are you trying to..."
Say something sort of makes you suspicious of your neighbor,
Why are you lighting your shoe on fire? You know,
right.
You know, what's that van doing in front of a stand in New York City?
So how do you walk that line between vigilance and yet not unwarranted suspicion?
I think you, first of all, don't live in fear. Live with respect. Respect all of your fellow citizens while you may have a question. So I guess it's a fine difference between being paranoid. In the Washington, D.C. area, we were particularly paranoid, as was New York, over anthrax 3 weeks after the attack on September 11th. And then in Washington, D.C., we had the so-called white van sniper. So those were the particularly paranoid times in the community that I was living in around Washington, D.C. after September 11th. And I was glad that that kind of paranoia disappeared. We now
But even that, you know, they have license plate readers, they have leads to look for those people, and none of that has disrupted this very important memorial.
Or days ago, 2 days ago, I guess, when this story broke, this terror threat, there were reports that one of them could be a U.S. citizen, then it was said to be two, who may have been on the launch.
To analyze again if any new evidence or new techniques of studying it should ever come out. But again, that particular study about the fire department and this dust was, you know, based on looking at the dust and then looking at these firefighters and recognizing there was an increased risk of cancer.
Sanjay Gupta, thank you.
Thank you.
You're looking at President Obama talking to family members less than a month after 9/11. U.S. and British forces were at war with Afghanistan's Taliban and hunting down al-Qaeda terrorists. But 10 years later, would you believe some Afghans know nothing about 9/11 and its connection to their country? We'll show you next.
Airlines flight, as well as who were inside the Pentagon. Now, I had a chance earlier in the week to sit down with the former Vice President Dick Cheney, and he reflected, together with me, on lessons learned from 9/11. Could it have been prevented? What was going through his mind?
In the terrorist community, if you will, there was a lot of reporting coming in. The very first report we received after we got elected, sworn in, talked, for example, about WMD in Iraq. There was constant reporting on al-Qaeda, on terrorist threats. I talked about terrorists in an interview I did in April of 2001 before we ever got down there. But we never had a piece of actionable intelligence. It doesn't do just to say, well, there's going to be an attack in the United States. That doesn't tell you anything. So
you didn't do anything after you got that report?
I didn't say that. I think there was a lot of work done by the intelligence community that created the alert posture and alert system. If anybody had had intelligence that would have let us intercept or interfere with that attack, obviously.
Root cause and justification. It turns out, not only were the villagers oblivious to 9/11, but so were the Afghan police, and even some of the translators working with the U.S. military.
But you don't know the history of this event?
No, I have no idea about the story of this.
Have you ever seen these pictures before?
No, I didn't.
In fact, after showing the images to dozens of Afghans, I only found one person who clearly recognized them and could connect them to the US's initial reason for coming to Afghanistan. And that was the police district chief in Marja.
He says that the Taliban, the terrorists, they attacked to the building of New York and they killed most of the people. They destroyed this building. So that was the reason.
Looking at pictures of the President of the United States and, of course, First Lady Michelle Obama. They are in Shanksville at the memorial there. And talk about your pastoral scene. I mean, it gives you a sense of how far away. We had two cities attacked and then this plane where there was that horrendous fight in the cockpit that went down in rural Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
President Obama and Michelle Obama were here at the World Trade site earlier this morning. along with former President Bush and his wife Laura and their daughters. He will also then go on to the Pentagon, along with the First Lady Michelle Obama, for a commemoration ceremony there.